Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another fantastic hands-on SAP Dev episode, the third in this little mini-series, The Art and Science of CAP, with, I'm very proud to say, my good friend Daniel Hutzel here. Welcome, Daniel, again.
Hey,
And Daniel's in the chat. Now, that means there's extra pressure on you lot to put whatever you think, your thoughts, your ideas, your concerns, your questions, your reactions to what Daniel is going to be showing. Let us know in the chat. It's always great. I mean, generally speaking, it's always great for when you're doing a live stream to see reactions in the chat and see people saying things. So yeah, so be even more talkative. I know it's Thanksgiving and everything, so people might be quite quiet or away. But yes, Visas, good morning to you in Bangkok, Thailand. Good morning and welcome. Visas is a regular on the Hands on SAP live stream. Anyway, so yeah, I'm going to share my screen because what I want to do while Daniel's having his breakfast is just sort of briefly summarize what we covered last week, so then we can slide nicely into this week. So let me just share. I'll share the whole thing, entire screen. There we go. Share the entire screen, and let me go here. And I wrote some notes. Now, last week, basically, we had a nice little tour, a preview of what's going to be coming out, hopefully in the November release, maybe a little bit after that, but basically in the Capire, the Capire documentation, Daniel's been working on sort of overhauling some of the sections, getting started sections, for example, and within the CDS section, there's a new guide about aspect-oriented modeling, and Daniel talked about that a little bit as well. And the About Cap a guide as well. Daniel mentioned last week that it was a little bit too sort of promotional material like. So it's now being turned into, and we saw a lot of that with the best practices section, more of a basically a do's and don'ts, which is for me as a developer fantastic. Tell me what I need to do, tell me what I need to know, and tell me what I should not be doing as well and why. We talked about JavaScript. It's very hard not to talk about JavaScript when I'm on the stream, and some of the inspiration that has been taken from JavaScript. And in that new sort of About Cap guide, Daniel sort of zoomed in a little bit on one of the bad practices, talking about code generation. And we had some great conversation about how you can sort of get yourself into a situation that you don't want to be in when you've been using code generators because you've got stale code, you've modified it, you can't change it, you can't fix it, etc., etc. It's better to have the code in the framework because, as Daniel said last week, each line of code not written is free of errors. And then Daniel, going through the About Cap guide, sort of shared this new map, this sort of 10,000 meter view. In fact, I did write in my notes here, I did have 30,000 feet, but I thought, no, I better be modern and European and put 10,000 meters. These are notes for myself, by the way, not for you lot. But anyway, let's share your workings. So this was a brilliant way for us to sort of explore the surface area of the concepts and the design principles that are important in CAP. And because it's hands-on SAP Dev, you see things happen live. Daniel Live added a new section, to the handful of sort of key concepts, and that new section, of course, was data, because basically business applications, business services are sort of data centric. And then Daniel talked about service interfaces. Services are interfaces. And we talked about that, and even the database layers themselves. We don't call them drivers. We don't think of them in terms of drivers because we talk to them in the same way. This abstraction layer. We talk to the database service abstraction layer just like we talk to any other service. And then Daniel dived into one of my favorite features of any language, but also a favorite feature of CAP and of the CDS command line, which is the REPL. And there's some new features in the REPL coming down the pipe, I think, soon. I'm going to say soon because it's not for me to say when that is. And then finally, when I was digging around, who knew the C in CDL stands for conceptual? So yeah, we had an amazing session last week, and I'm going to hand over to you, Daniel, because I'm super excited to find out what we're going to be talking about next.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, DJ, and thanks for this summary. Helped me a lot because, as we just talked, would be great if I could continue where I stopped last time. If only I knew where I stopped last time, so that helped.
Brilliant.
Yeah, sorry for having breakfast.
Hey,
I'm
this is all real all the time. This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
real life.
exactly. You see, I also not shaved as usual, basically. Yeah, because I'm pretty busy these days, really working on several things, like sometimes hacking. I think you saw
Amazing.
recently
Yes.
that I added the YAML support to CDSN and other things, and also because we worked in Rebel, I added a few things to Rebel, and DJ helped me fixing the bugs. Thanks for that.
The tiniest thing ever. Yes, I've contributed.
The nice thing you said, it's due to, what did you say, sort of? It's due to the conditional operator and JavaScript likely or so, which was a nice description of, well, it was just a dump bug done by me.
Well, in fact, it was a really interesting it was the coalescing assignment, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's actually we can even show it live, right?
It's a beautiful new construct in JavaScript. It's the
Yeah.
question mark equals.
Uh, uh, yeah, sorry, we are just losing the line again. But no, yeah, yeah, it's something like this. I had something like there's a variable first, and I want to capture the first in a row
Hmm.
of things, and I declared this variable first to be like null in the beginning,
Yep.
or undefined, say.
Can we make that a little bit bigger, please, Daniel?
Yeah, yeah, it's rebel again. So rebel is your friend, right? I
As your
mentioned.
friend.
And then I said, well, and the first time I want to do something, I want to capture what I do.
Yep.
And I said, let's say it's one. And the next time it might be two. And I wanted to assign two to something else, like X should be two, but I want to capture two there, right?
Yep.
So I did, and I wanted, DJ found out, well, X was always only first, because of course, this is exactly what I wrote here.
That's right. And the I've just put in a link in the chat as well, folks. Let us know in the chat if you've come across this feature before. It's the nullish coalescing operator. No, sorry, the nullish coalescing assignment,
Yeah.
which is the extra it's the version with the equal sign.
And I use it all over the place. So it's my standard best practice pattern in coding is you have a cache. You want to cache something in a cache if it's not
Yeah.
already cached, and that is the perfect place. Like
Yes.
already in, then just leave it there. If not, do something expensive here, like requiring a module or so, right?
Now, talking of that, would you say, I think there's a name for that approach, and it's called the Orkish maneuver. And it was that was coined by Randall Schwartz in the Perl community.
Okay, you should share a link on that.
I will, I
Yeah,
will.
yeah. Uh, There are other cool things, by the way. Just brings me to that thing, and just to spoil that session completely.
Here we go. Yes, it is. It's a play on the phrase the pronunciation of cash or cash Orkish.
Okay. Yeah, I used another cool feature of JavaScript recently, which is aspect-oriented programming. And you remember we had this aspect-oriented
We did.
session. And I think this is also something that we might have in one of the next session that we share how in CAP you not only apply aspect orientation concepts to like models, but also to how you implement in Java. And we could look at how we implemented the validate thing. Let's get rid of that right-hand side here. Get rid of that I said.
You can close that. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, what
Mhm.
we see here is the following pattern. There's a class any, and it means any definition in a season model. And there's a class struct, which
Ah,
means all structs definition. And arrays is a different kind. This is actually the core type system of CDS, what you see here.
you mentioned that last week. The core type system is basically taken from JavaScript.
Exactly. And an entity, of course, is a struct, because what is a struct? A struct has elements, and an
Yep.
entity is a thing that has elements. It's just an addition. And then we have actions, and we have associations, and we have compositions. And because this is the core type system of CDS, and when you load a model in CDS, and in JavaScript, you may have seen that we have this concept of CDS linked model. We link the season definitions in the JSON, which is the CDS, to these classes here, to the JavaScript prototype-oriented classes. And because of we did so, we can put behavior to these classes, or to the prototypes of these classes actually. And this is exactly what we do here. We do add a method validate to the adding class. So that is inherited by all the authors now. And then we override this validate function in the struct case, because the struct validate would just walk through all the
Yeah, walk
elements
through each of the
and
elements.
apply validate on all the elements. And then we go the same for arrays and the same for entities and something different for associations, etc.
Mhm.
And this is aspect-oriented programming in JavaScript. So the base classes in our core model didn't have this aspect of being able to validate a payload of data,
But you can,
but we just added this aspect in this module validate, because it's about validation. So we added the aspect, and we added that at
that
all
is a
the wrong places.
perfect example.
And this really, and I even learned a lot also again about JavaScript, how then inheritance helps you to do the right kind of aspect-oriented programming. It's really, everybody should know this. And this documented CUP API even, you can do so. It's meant for you to use this approach as well. We did it before the validation, and it was the standard way of implementing thing. It was
Mhm.
one validation function, and in there you had a lot of if
If then
that
else.
kind of thing is
Yeah.
an entity, etc. And this is much better here and
Yes.
faster. Okay, so
Fantastic.
yeah, this is not the topic of our session, but this I always was looking in preparation of what we had as a slide deck as
Yeah,
our
this is great.
paper.
This is our our backstage notes.
Right. And yeah, so we looked at that one to some extent in the aspect-oriented programming thing, modeling thing. Um, we looked last time a bit at that one, basically, and the querying. We touched
Yeah.
the associations. We talked about the agnostic thing or mentioned it. That would be something to deep dive on. Intrinsic localities, of course, another one. Yeah, and we use REPL all the time.
Yes.
No, I maybe we yeah, from your summary, I would like maybe to start even here to show you the next iteration of that as you said is hopefully in your hands soon.
Mhm.
Will be released with the Capire documentation that we planned to publish this week. But because I'm still a bit late, so they're waiting for me actually for these central guides. We will publish
It can
it.
even be a late Christmas present. How about that?
No, it will be early next week.
Ah, there we go. An early Christmas present.
Yeah, and in is definitely, as you already mentioned, this aspect-oriented modeling guide
Yeah.
and the new best practices guide that we looked at last time with this graphic also here,
Mhm.
and new about guide, as you said, also and summarized. The old about guide was a weird mix of deep dives into technical things, to impress technicians and high level blah blah promotion stuff to impress decision makers. And I separated this now. We have the best practices. This is for us. And I have the introduction,
Yeah.
new
That's
about
great.
CAP, which is for the people with the money, um, paying us.
Very
Yeah,
important too.
maybe as a quick glimpse across that and maybe look at that. So we repeat the standard slogans and I try to prove it more because I called it now the value proposition. So, and the value proposition is not just like a hope we get this benefit thing, but really a promise, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, jumpstart and grow as you go. Jumpstart development, fast turnaround. If you do local development, unfortunately, we see a lot of projects who don't do local development. So what do we mean with local development? VS Code and on your machine versus Business Application Studio? No, it's rather about outside. It's called inner loop development.
Yeah.
When you develop for the cloud, don't develop in the cloud, but develop in a nutshell, very close turnaround times without always connecting to HANA or your XSUAA or whatever, because that slows you down like hell, right?
Practice developing on a train.
Exactly. And then when you are done, send it over to the cloud, run it to the CD pipeline, and then test it and do the integration
I think
tests.
maybe a reason why people still do that is because they don't understand how much CAP can help you and also enables you. Maybe they don't feel
Right.
as though they can because they're so used to other frameworks requiring them to connect to the cloud that this
That's
is
a,
still new.
that's a major thing, actually, and this is why I also mentioned it, and I will come back to it hopefully in this session when we talk about hexagonal architecture, because many people talk about hexagonal architecture. It's really fancied, rightfully, because it's really good. And I went back to the origin where Alistair Cockburn first talked about hexagonal architecture. It was actually, DJ, you might know it, in the C2 wiki.
Yes, yes, I actually have a page on the C2 wiki.
Okay, hey, yeah, and this is where I come from. These guys are these giants of our world, right?
Exactly. In fact, sorry to interrupt. I was at the open source convention over in Oregon lots of years ago, and I met Ward Cunningham and had a chat with him.
Oh, wow, wow. Cool. So, Walt Cunningham, you may know it, you others, as he's one of the driving guys behind the Agile Manifesto
Yes.
before that was taken over by the Scrum Monster.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, loose coupling is also the thing that helps us. And as you know, if you use CUP, that we offer you, hey, do it fast on your machine using SQLite in memory as a stand-in for your target production HANA database, or use file-based messaging as a stand-in mock for the real messaging, and so on. And this didn't just happen, it was actual extra work each time. And this is what we even say it's the Kalesi principle. How to design a cup component is always the same thing. It has to be good, it has to be easy to use, and it always has to support mocking because that fuels fast turnaround times.
Yes. In fact, I need to, well, need to, may I interrupt for another second? Because I think
What's
maybe implicit here is another axiom from
an
Ward Cunningham,
axiom? I like this.
which is to do the simplest thing that could possibly work. And I personally see that in the jump start and the grow as you go. That to me, I don't think you've actually used that phrase here, but that philosophy permeates everything about getting started with CAP for me.
Yeah, right. Uh, And this is coming back to the C2 wiki hexagonal architecture thing. I read Alistair's original writings again, and I found out, hey, this guy, what is the intent of hexagonal architecture? And in his very first sentence, he basically answers it. It's exactly this thing. Be able to have your core domain run in different environments. His main thing was in different test environments where you put other stand-ins on the outside to your ports, stand-ins that allow you to do that in different things. So instead of the real printer, you have a mock of a printer to test it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you always have all your hardware or your real platform services connected and hope that all these services are up and running, and then your test run, this is like it happens once a week or so, right?
Yes.
Resilient design means you should be able to continue working and continue testing fast without being slowed down by some other component not being up and running without these dependencies. And this is exactly the idea of CAP when it comes to that, and actually of hexagonal architecture, as I sort of re-found out. And yeah, we will visit that again. Now, proven best practices, yeah, cloud native by design. We don't go through that this time, I would say, but I found out we could be quite proud that we do some things right. On the so when CAP does this thing, without going into detail, what does it give you? Well, you don't have to do it and can instead focus on your domain.
Yeah.
So domain is another thing, of course, and this is a contributing factor to that. Focusing on your functional requirements, because the non-functional are usually not that much fun. And even more, when it comes to application development, then if in things like tenant isolation or security, if we would depend on each developer in each
Yeah.
application project, having understood everything, caring about everything, and doing everything right, and only then we are sure to not have any tenant isolation breaches or security breaches. If we go that model, then we are in real trouble, right?
Yes. Yes. I mean, and I think this is especially important in today's era of microservice 12-factor
Right, right.
style approaches, where if you had to do everything all the time, you'd never get to the domain.
Yes, exactly. And the domain, by the way, is where, you know, you are paid for and we make money with to work on nice things, right?
Right.
Yeah. So served out of the box, that is pretty much clear. Focus on the main. We just had this. Avoid technical debt. This is exactly in the line of what I just touched, and this is a chapter I added and want to a bit lay out or outline how CAP helps in avoiding technical debt. So what is technical debt? The one thing I found here on this page of this company is basically they are saying your managers ask you to deliver fast the next increment of the business software, and you don't have time to do it right, to
Yeah.
design correctly, etc. That is one thing. And the other thing is, I would say, writing too much code. The more boilerplate code you write, the more errors you have in that code, the more design flaws you have in that.
Yeah.
So, and why do I say you have in that? Because I have in that. So if I write code, it's never correct the first time. Never. Not even the second or third. And I always refactor my code.
Mhm.
On a 10th iteration, maybe I'm happy with it and still refactor it. Yeah. So doing things right from the very beginning is not possible. And the more code you write, the more mistakes you make. And this sums up to technical debt.
Yeah.
You have to pay for these debts in the future, of course, definitely. And to avoid this by not writing code is one approach that CAP helps you with. Providing single points to fix, it's a dump thing of a framework, of course, right? Because if there's a mistake in the framework, and we always do mistakes, but we can fix it at this one place. And by the way, how do we find that bug? so we can fix it because we have a lot of adopters and the adopter is growing. And as you know, we try to be a bit not sappish way, but rather open, so everybody can look into our code, and
Yeah,
we get bug reports from you guys and from our internal adopters, and this is how we can fix the bugs, find the bugs, fix the bugs, and when we fix it, every adopter gets a fix without even having seen the bug ever. So
exactly.
3 points to fix is also a very important thing that people frequently forget when they say, no, wait, I can do it my own way.
In fact, for
Even,
those watching this particular the replay, or even now, if you didn't see last week's episode, Daniel talks in a little bit more detail of that and recounts this really nice occasion where somebody had been relying on some undocumented feature, and but it Daniel agreed to fix it in the framework because they were relying so heavily on it.
yeah. Yeah, and you see that headline here, that's another section I added next to it, and it connects exactly to this code generation thing, where we had it last time and the example of Swagger. Swagger
Mm.
needs 500 lines of code to not reach any of our capabilities, while
Yes.
we reach all these capabilities with 0 lines of code. Yeah, AI. I thought I need to add something here and answer some question because we are approached a lot, of course, these
Yeah.
days with AI. Also with internal teams who actually add AI capabilities to CAP. Like there's this Maui thing. It is an AI-driven search and learning assistant. It guides you to the right places where you find information to solve the thing that you asked for.
Cool.
When I do development, I have Copilot switched on, and I love Copilot. Um, when I'm in JavaScript files, in the implementation of CAP even, or as a developer using CAP, I get a lot of Copilot assists. Looks
Yes.
like this thing understands CAP, right? Even if I go into CDS model, and the CDS is still quite proprietary to SAP and to us, Copilot understands CDS. It gives me a lot of help while I type very
Yeah.
incrementally, and this is what I love. It's not this one-off code generator approach, but iteratively throughout the whole lifetime of my application, which grows over time, and I can never ever generate such a big application again. But it helps me still, and even more, the more code, the more knowledge I feed into Copilot, the more I get back, right?
Yep.
And by the way, when I wrote this documentation in my Markdown files, Copilot wrote, I would say, 30% to 50% of all the text you see in the new guides is from Copilot.
Wow.
Of course, always just proposals, and I fix it sort of or tune it, but it understands CAP and it even can explain CAP in plain text, right? In plain language. And this really a great example of coding assist is definitely a key thing. Another key thing is code analysis,
Mhm.
helping us and you to detect bad practices like the things that we just document here and guiding to the best ones. Of course, also code generation, but it becomes, yeah, debatable. So I hate code generators, and I would never use Copilot to do a code generation for me for the real code I need to build. But for tests or for test data or for anything around, of course, it can help a lot. And
Yes.
having a lot of tests, even bad ones, is better than having no tests, right?
Exactly.
So this is definitely where code generation shines, I would say. Project scaffolding and generating some code there, rather skeletons and stubs, is also definitely a good thing. And in the new release, you find also a new tool by our tools team. The tools team really is great, by the way.
Yes, I
There's
agree.
several new tools, additions to the CDS command line for this. One is for the scaffolding as well. No, two actually. Yeah. The other thing is really, and this is my belief at least, I will never be a complete believer of AI and the matrix wins. I think human intelligence can't be replaced. And I believe there's a difference between a ChatGPT generated thesis, which has exactly one ultimate final done criteria, you're graduate, and then you never touch it again, right? You don't
Yes.
rewrite your thesis. That's completely different to writing a piece of enterprise software which needs to live and be adapted and be changed and be maintained and needs to scale to new requirements.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and so why did Copilot understand CAP? And actually, this is also what some AI experts told me. Well, because CAP itself is this major contribution to AI. First of all, it's relatively simple in the structures and the concepts. The way we do entities is not like very polluted, but very clean, because we had the luxury to start on a green field, as opposed to the ABAP CDS colleagues, which we work very close together. Their
Mhm.
problem is we have an R3 with 10,000 tables, and the job of CDS was to put 5 layers of views on top to
Yeah.
turn the Baroque R3 data model into a modern surface. That's why, by the way, in ABAP CDS, the ABAP CDS synonym is always CDS views, right? And when we came with CAP and our usage of CDS, we had to educate, no, in CAP, CDS is about entities. Yes,
Right.
also views, but
Very
not
simple.
only views, right?
Yeah. Very simple distinction.
And yeah, the other thing is this agnostic model, the way you um, implement services, you declare services in CDS, you implement services, and you consume services is always the same, regardless of which kind of service, including our framework provided services, like the database service, as I showed last time. You consume it the very same way as you would consume your application service or a remote service from somewhere else. And this is this power of CAP, which in turn gives birth to several things like that allows us to do loose coupling, right? So you have your application that connects to another microservice, but you just mock this other microservice even in memory or in process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is what AI uses to always be able to give us the same proposals and assists.
One of the things, talking of the final phrase there, visibility in the public world, one of the things that I do, I would love to know if anybody else does this in the chat, is I often look through the sources in the SAP-samples organization on GitHub. There's a ton of CDS
Yeah,
files in there, and I just sometimes take a coffee and browse through and think, oh, I wonder why they did it that way, or oh, that's interesting. I've never seen that structure before, or that phrasing. Because I think it is a little bit of it's a little bit like music. The fact that it's not polluted by the microservice requirements, the heavy sort of non-functional requirements, and everything is uniform.
right.
CDS, reading and writing CDS becomes like reading and writing melodies in music notation, in that everything's this, it's the same notation, but it could be, as different as, A to Z, what actually is happening. But the phrase, the way things are expressed are the same. And like you say, this helps AI latch onto that and then reproduce it in the Copilot context, for example.
Right. The samples is a good thing that we should revisit in the series because there's a lot of things in these samples, as you mentioned and detected some. So I remember your session that we also had you as a teacher for our cup teams in Rhodes at the last year's recap.
Yes, I
You,
wouldn't say teacher. I would just say maybe idiot at the front, like
no, not really.
sample idiot.
So what you detected is really this thing that I actually depicted here at that time. you know, that the bookshop samples set
Yeah.
itself is meant to teach about how to do a very clean bookshop, how to do another service called the
Yeah.
order service, and another one, the supplier service, review service, and then build another project that sort of composes these things. And this is actually when I try out things and to learn myself. Well, this is just an idea. Let's see how it feels. And I usually do this in bookshop, and usually I leave some traces there, which are loose ends that I didn't conclude myself or didn't document. I didn't dare to document because it's too much out of the kitchen sink, right? But you see the traces, and yeah, we should maybe revisit some of them because they could be very valuable also for
Yes.
us. That is also a good example for you mentioned microservices, and yeah, there's also now this best practice guide and the bad practice twin sister of it, where you see things like this don't do
Oh, yeah.
object relational mappers, PO-centric frameworks, no determinations, validations, please. I will come to that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
always done it this way. You mentioned this, DJ. So, well, we always did it this way is maybe one of the worst sentence when it comes to improving over time, right?
Yes.
Um, and yeah, squared hexagons, that is something that I would look at. And then it's also the microservice mania, I called it now. There's actually articles out there with this title, which is pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
story is about, yeah, yeah. What is microservice? The first thing is, I have this in the author guide in the best practice part. CAP services are about how to structure your software, your application into modular encapsulated components caring for a certain job. One CAP service for one use case is my rule
Mhm.
of thumb. Now, what is microservices? Microservices are deployment unit. This is something completely different.
Yeah.
Don't confuse the idea of modularization and services with a deployment unit concept like microservices. There are papers out there, and I also add this information here. That is just a thing to start with. And going back to that, so these are CAP services. And yes, you can run each later on as a separate microservice if you like so. But you are not forced to. You can distribute it to microservices as is most appropriate. And
Yeah.
how do you decide how to cut your monolith into microservices? I have two answers. First, only when you know enough about your application, and this is not when you start the project, but only later on. We learned this also from internal huge SAP projects using CAP.
Mhm.
They started with a monolith. They built it with CAP services, so it was modularized in the inner monolith. This doesn't mean not modularized. It just does
That's
mean
right.
one deployment, right? And then later on, they figured out, okay, that part here, let's say maybe the reviews part, we want to scale this independently of the rest because that has a different load of user throughput, input, etc. And then they carved it out, or they just moved that CAP service into a separate microservice deployable. But CAP allows you to do this late cut microservices thing. And that's an important thing. That is also, meanwhile, outside seems to be the trend going away from the microservice mania, which sort of left us with what was a function in the past is now called a microservice, or a library in the past is now called a microservice. It seems we have forgotten that concepts like libraries, packages, modules, and functions still exist in
That's so true.
programming languages. Okay. Yeah. Um, going to the best practices. So we basically starting walked through last time with that thing here. I added now also in a sense of what people should know after having seen a rough picture. Well, the basic principle of CAP is You write CDS models, thereby you tell us what you want. We feed our generic runtimes with them to do the very best in doing what you meant and wanted, instead
Yep.
of having to do that imperatively. So this is where most of your content lives, at least in the starting. And then we do the generic implementations here to serve requests based on the information you gave us in the service models. And this is the same principle that we all use since centuries when we do relational databases. Basically, a, a database schema, so a DDL, create table,
Mhm.
create view, is a schema, the declarative information we feed into that generic runtime called Postgres or HANA in order for that runtime, when a query comes in, know what to do and do it automatically for you. So
Yeah.
it's not that you put in code here, right? Except for triggers, which are our event handlers. Um, you don't write code that says, "Hey, I know I have to go to this block on my hard disk and read these bytes in little endian order," right? Nobody would ever do that. People used to do that. So DJ, you had to do it in your past,
Yes,
right?
I did. When we were designing the database layout for the indices of the R2 systems on VSAM, I remember working out which cylinders and which tracks
Right.
the ABES and ABIB had to go on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So this we happily use what databases give us for. And I just mentioned the trigger, and this is another example. Well, the services layer, which was missing before CAP came in the non-ABAP world in BTP, we just took proven examples how authors did it. Like we took querying when expressing requests, like databases use querying because it's a data-centric model, and querying was quite successful over time. So why should we know better than the most successful ones? And we took the notion of schemas, in that case, service models, and we took the notion of triggers, in our case, event handlers, but the very same concepts. And when we say Fiori annotation, basically this is like the UI markup added to our models, and we feed another generic runtime with it, which is called the Fiori elements
Yes.
renderer.
It's
Okay,
clarity all the way down, let's put it that way.
yeah. And the other thing, why is CAP pretty successful on that? Because we have these blue arrows. We do that everything in one language, in one model, where you can, instead of, here you declared what a book is. If you would now go to a service model and describe it in OpenAPI or in OData EDMX CSDL, then you would just repeat yourself in a different language. Well, there's a book and the book has a title and it has an ID, etc. While we say, no, you just derive it from something already known. The idea of inheritance, by the way, in object-oriented programming. Brad J. Cox, another giant, the inventor of Objective-C, when asked how to describe inheritance, the concept of inheritance in
Yeah.
object-oriented programming. There was a lot of scientific work, and he just said, well, it's the art of describing something in how it differs from something known, something unknown from something known. And his example was, well, if I have to explain you what a zebra is, I would just say a zebra is a horse with stripes, and you would immediately have a rough understanding of a zebra.
Perfect.
And this is exactly what we do. This projection thing. When you say in a service, my books that I expose, I don't repeat all the things, but I just say it's a projection on the books in this schema over there, then this is this arrow. And this makes it A, so easy to derive things, UI models the same, and B, gives us the information because you map your interface here, how it projects to something down there, known in here, and we just take this projection and translate the queries from here to a transformed query that we send down there. So the projections in the service models is what allows us to at all serve requests generically. If you don't have this projection information, but you only have an interface language, that brings us back to the interfaces. That is an interface with a structure. And here we declare this interface as a projection on something else. If we don't have this projection information, no way to serve requests to this interface automatically.
Yep.
And
Yep.
this is the situation in GraphQL and OData without CUP and OpenAPI with Swagger. They don't know how to project it to something, and therefore they can't serve it automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, services. Services is not microservice. This is the thing that we just talked about. Don't confuse CUP services with microservices. Not
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we have.
Deployment units.
By the way, Marianne Theis has just commented that, or maybe he's suggesting that we need to add another noun to the title of this series.
Which is
Philosophy, the art and
philosophy.
science of
Oh,
philosophy.
I have good idea, Marianne. Actually, sorry about this. Yeah, DJ, because in the last session you told me, hey, it would be great if we could explain the relation of CDL versus season and all
Yes.
stuff, you know. So I added this diagram and added a few more notes on that. So this is a conceptual definition language, which is for creating human readable models.
Mm-hmm.
And the schema notation is a transistor expressing, it's actually the same language, you know.
Yeah.
Because language is something you think of. It's not something you can look at in pixels or so, but it's a different syntax of the same language to express the same thing in different representations. So the CDL source code you read expresses a saying that the JSON file that we generate out of this has the same information, but this one is just for machines.
But thinking about this after we talked about this briefly last week, it reminded me of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which of course is about how the language that you have influences how you think and how you can express. And therefore, that's why if all we humans had was season, the YAML representation or the JSON representation to describe the experience using CAP would be totally different, and that's why CDL, the human readable, that's why it's so important for that to be a delight to use and also to be as simple and flexible as it is, because
Right.
otherwise we'd be really struggling.
Right. Otherwise, we are just lost in translation, right?
Oh, nice reference there.
Yeah, this pattern, I like this pattern so much that I just repeated it all over the place. There's another language called CQL,
Yeah.
and there's another object notation called CQN. And this is also what I explain here. So as a human, I write CQL. And by the way, there's a nice, I covered this comparison that I had in the past, comparing CQL, GraphQL, OData, and SQL. And yeah, because there was a time where some people at SAP told us and everybody, so we should stop OData and stop CQL and only do GraphQL from now on.
Oh my goodness. What
Would
a
have
future
been a
that would
bad
have
idea,
been.
maybe. GraphQL is really, really pretty cool, but it's not as powerful as some other things. And what some people don't understand sometimes, why didn't we use GraphQL? Well, first of all, GraphQL was invented after CQL. We were there before.
Yeah.
And I would still claim we are just better.
I
They,
would certainly
they
too,
are
yeah.
good, but we are better. And we are even easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, back to Marianne philosophy. I then linked here this old paper that I wrote in the very beginning of CDS, which is on the nature of models. And I just started adding some more thoughts on it. And it
But
goes
the
into
title of this first
metaphysics of
section,
languages now. Yeah. So what is a representation? What is a syntax? What is a season representation? I call the other ones now reflections like SQL and OData and GraphQL that we generate out of CQL or out of CDL are not complete. It's usually with a loss of information when we do these conversions. So I call them reflections, not representations.
yep, yeah,
Now, what is a language? A language is something thought of. What is syntax, etc. And but then I had to stop because it ended up into metaphysics level tools of
fantastic.
life, and finally in Platon's cave example. So, what is a service? I said last time, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. By the way, just sort of to excuse myself a little bit, the reason I use the word representation is because I still think in terms of REST and HTTP, and representations of resources is a big thing in my mind. But
Yeah.
that's the reason I use that word.
Right. This is also why I added the data, and this is why I actually also wanted to share and filled it in now. Why is data important? Because we have to tell, hey, data is please, please, please passive. And why should it be passive? Why shouldn't you use data access objects, DTO, Spring repositories, active records, object relational mappers, where you always have like objects encapsulating data and behavior. But if you do so, you have two problems. That data that you have to transport, the representations, through statically shaped objects is never extensible. How would you transport a new field X that your customer wants in their invoice through a static Java class that you developed and compiled? Of course, you can add extra support for these kind of things, a Java class plus a map. But this is the point. You have to add extra things. If you just stick to the most simple way to represent data in JavaScript, anyways, records, arbitrarily shaped records, and in Java hash maps, then you are intrinsically extensible. And this is what CAP is. So extensible data is one reason to stick to the principle of passive data. And the other one is querying. Querying is key when it comes to efficient access to data, especially in the cloud. And this is also why the GraphQL guys came to the same conclusion. And when you do querying, you end up with the data, your order or your book record that you get back is never the same shape. So when you read a list of books, you definitely don't want to read all images and cover images and the long description, but you just need the ID, the title, the author name, etc. So like a flattened list.
Yes,
When you read the details, you want to have the full books. And for another thing, you need another transformed schema view on your books data, on your data. Means data is variably shaped. It's never the same shape. And
exactly.
therefore, this is passive data principle of CUP.
Just
Next.
before we carry on, I'm also conscious of time. We've got about
Yeah.
just over 5 minutes left. But Marianne had a question in the chat. Maybe you want to have a look at that.
Okay. The link with the YouTube
No,
link.
no, no. Just
Okay.
above that, nested
But
projection.
this looks interesting. I will go. Yeah, closure. Is it about rich chickens? Are we the value of values? This is one, and the other
Yeah,
one
so
is
that was
so
the link to the value of values is what I just typed into the
yeah.
chat for people. But
Nested
just above
projects
that,
are not
Marian is
possible
asking
with
about
SQL.
nested
No, yeah,
projections.
no, they are not possible with SQL. Actually, I can deep dive on that in a REPL next time.
Oh,
SQL means it nested projections is like a subselect in the select clause, not in the where clause, and not a scalar one. You can have subselects in SQL in the select clause, but only with scalar results. One row, one column. And nested projection is a too many result set embedded like the orders with all the items and multiple columns. And this really, you see, that is actually the reason why in our projection syntax of CQL and as the select variant, so select from books, we have still the option of listing the select clause after the select A, comma B, comma C from books, but we prefer this body kind of syntax because that is then naturally going on with nested bodies. We just put another thing here. Let me do this as a final thing in REPL, something like, yeah, that is the fixed one now. So DJ
Right.
help me fix it. And now you can do something like, say, this is my query and I want a CTSQL. That is a new variant that I just built. It's not yet released. And you can write, so now CQL, and you say select from books. And now comes the projection, and I want ID and title. Let's rather do the authors. The authors is this authors, and this is what you can also do in your program code here with a tag template string variable. So author name and the books. And from the books, because books, there's another metaphysical thing. What is an association? An association is a relva in the relational model of SQL. It points to some set of data, and you can project and query the data. So let's project it. I want the ID of the books, and I want the title of the books.
That's beautiful.
And I could go on and say there's a relva called genres, which is an association, and I want to project on genres, and I want the name of the genre.
I'm just noticing what Marian said. He says he's watching on his phone. So Marian, just wait until you see what Daniel's typed into the REPL here, because you might not be able to see that on your phone. But it's like mind blowing.
Yeah, and this the other thing, that is borrowed for functional programming. The notion of first-class objects in functional programming, the functions were turned into first-class objects that you can keep in a variable, send as a parameter, and
And
further
emit
process
emit
somewhere.
from a function as well.
Right, and the query in CAP is the very same. You can assign it to a variable. It's not materialized. It's not executed. Only when you say execute in Node.js, it's the await keyword. It is materialized. Should be materialized. Oh, sorry. I need to turn it into a QL object. Well, I don't have the branch checked out because it's not yet in main. That's the reason of that. Books. Here we go.
Beautiful.
So see is we got the authors with their names, books expanded with genre per book expanded. And this is nested projections, which is not possible in SQL. We can even show you the lookalike SQL that we generate, and then we resolve the problem of SQL not being able to understand this by flattening it into a lot of semi-joined stuff and JSON functions.
What an amazing answer to Marian's question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. In fact, I'm maybe going to suggest we finish here, because that's a great point upon which to finish, just staring at that output there from the nested projections. And to thank everybody for watching, and of course thank Daniel as well. We might do another follow-up one next week, but we're going to do a follow-up one, whether it's next week. I'll talk to Daniel in the meantime and we'll work it out. But also watch out on Capire for the upcoming November release. That's coming out soon. I'm super excited about that. And just to summarize the links in the chat that I added a link to a brilliant talk by Rich Hickey called The Value of Values, which I'm sure Daniel knows.
And the other one is Are We There Yet? Look for
Are
this
we there?
together.
Oh, yes. Are we there? That's fantastic too. Maybe I'll put the links in the description of the
Yeah.
video as well. And yes, the Orcish maneuver that was coined by Merlin, who's that's his code name, his avatar name. That's Randall Schwartz and his other Joseph, his co-author of a book on Pearl. That was the Orcish maneuver. There's a link to that as well, and of course a link to I read out on my Tech Aloud podcast an interview with Ward Cunningham about the simplest thing that could possibly work. There's a link to that as well in the description in the chat.
Yeah, and in the upcoming release of CutPy, you'll find an explanation about the hexagonal architecture, which we didn't make this time, and with the links to the original sources of it and some relation to cup.
Fantastic. Okay, so thanks, folks. Have a great weekend. And Marianne says thank you. John says thank you. AP says thank you. Nice to see you all. AP from Dusseldorf. And Daniel, thanks a lot. And bye for now.
Yep. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really fun. So I use it as a